Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I want to start off by apologizing for the slight delay in videos. This week's been pretty hectic, especially with the lead up to Halloween. Kids have been super excited about that. And then of course I had to partake in the trick-or-treating myself, so I haven't really got to the editing process that much. However, there will be videos on the way. With that being said, for today's video, I actually want to take a look at the announcement that Pierre made earlier this week in terms of him cutting the GST for new houses under $1 million. Now, obviously, that announcement on its own is fantastic. Everybody would love a little bit of relief, especially when buying a new house. However, the main thing I wanted to take a look at was all the stats that Pierre was mentioning, because some of them were quite surprising even for me. So without further ado, let's get into that announcement.
I have these memories of 29-year-olds opening these doors, saying, oh, we just moved in. We're having a couple of kids. We have a couple of kids. We got a dog. And this is our home. And that was normal, to have someone who was 28, 29, 30, moving into nice neighborhoods like this. That was because Canada had made a very simple promise. It wasn't anything revolutionary. It was just a very simple contract we had with the country. You work hard, you get a great paycheck, buys good food, and a nice home in a safe neighborhood. Very straightforward. And that's why millions of people came from around the world for that bargain. But after 9 years of Trudeau, that promise, like everything else, is broken. Housing costs have literally doubled. The average mortgage payment has gone from $1,400 to $3,200. The needed down payment for the average home has gone from $22,000 to $46,000. The average rent on a one-bedroom has gone from a measly $973 to now $2,200, roughly.
Now, this is something I've talked about before on the channel. Back in 2015, I had an apartment. It was 850 square feet, one bedroom. It was only $975. It was a fantastic unit. That same unit today, I believe, is already if not $2,000, $1,800 or $2,000. Now, my younger brother, who I mentioned also in a previous video, he's now gotten his own apartment with his girlfriend, much smaller, I think around maybe 650, and he's paying $2,500 for that. And this is why we're seeing an increase in homelessness and people not being able to afford food or heating or anything like that, because they need to start cutting costs where they can, because the cost of living hasn't kept up. And these are people with two incomes. If you just broke up my younger brother's apartment between him and his girlfriend, they're still paying more than what I was paying when I had left that apartment and bought the house that I'm currently in. So that's a huge shocker. But Pierre continues with the numbers, and it gets a lot worse.
It used to take 39% of the average family's income to make the average payment on the average home every month, back in 2015. Now it takes 60%. In Toronto today, it takes over 70% of your pre-tax income to make payments on the average home. In Vancouver, it's 98%.
I want you guys to take that in for a second. 98%. I don't know how anybody is surviving. And no wonder there's a bunch of homeless encampments and people just going to food banks and whatnot. Because Pierre breaks it down plain and simple. You basically would have to do nothing but work and pay your rent. Or pay your mortgage. That's all you could do.
Meaning, if you're in Vancouver today with the average income and you wanted to buy the average home, you'd have to stop paying taxes, stop eating, stop buying clothing, stop driving, stop vacationing, stop all forms of recreation, and it would still take 98% of all the money you had to make that monthly payment. Of course, that is mathematically impossible. No wonder there are 1,400 homeless encampments now in Ontario after 9 years of Trudeau and the NDP Liberals. 25% of Canadians live in poverty. 1/4 of kids go to school hungry every single day, according to the government's own data. Housing costs in Canada have risen 40% faster than incomes, the worst gap of any G7 country. In fact, Vancouver is now the third most expensive, Toronto the 10th in the world when you compare median income to median house prices, and homes in the United States are between 25 and 45% cheaper than they are on the Canadian side of the border, proving this is not a global problem, it is made in Canada.
Now, most of you know I don't just kind of sit here and take what they say at face value. So I actually went and did a little bit of digging myself. And yep, if we look at the stats here, year over year change in income required for mortgages in Canadian cities, Vancouver has gone down. But look at the income needed in 2023, let alone 2024. $250,000 in terms of your income. And sure, even if you divided that by two individuals, I don't really know too many jobs that are paying over 100,000 that aren't like high-end corporate jobs, or maybe some tradesmen are making that kind of money, but the average Joe is never making this much money. And as you go down the list, you get to Toronto, they're pretty close. Some of these other places are a little bit more reasonable, but when you scroll down to required income for the average priced homes in Canada, they break it down from city to city. In Ontario, Toronto, $1 million home, you basically need to be making $162,000 or 188 depending on your amortization years. And your monthly payments are off the charts. And again, that's just in Toronto. If we go to BC where he's talking about, look at Vancouver. $6,000 a month? I know plenty of people who make less than $6,000 in a month. So obviously they wouldn't be living in Vancouver if that was the case, but this is insane, like the pricing that you need. So yeah, Pierre's not lying when he's saying that prices has gone up 40% and that income hasn't kept up with it. And that's what I was talking about earlier. Cost of living hasn't been keeping up. And this has a huge trickle down effect where now even seniors, they're ending up either being homeless or having to live in tents. The story that I'm about to show you right up after this lady has moved into her shed in the backyard. Now, due to some other complications, but also because she can't afford to go anywhere else.
And then I lay back with my blanket, like so. And her bed is better because then my feet don't fall off.
This is how Debbie Lloyd has slept for the last month, cramped inside her shed. 2 years ago, her home was found to have mold in its basement. Her landlord was notified.
She then said she was going to have it fixed. I believed her.
Months later, her health worsened, but her doctors couldn't figure out why. This summer, according to medical reports, she lost hearing in 1 ear and began blacking out. It wasn't until a repairman came to check on the furnace that confirmed mold was still in the basement.
It made perfect sense now why my lungs were so bad, why my sinuses were so bad, why my ear.
Lloyd had her own air quality testing done, and the town of Midland issued a comply order to her landlord. Remediation has since taken place in the basement, but it has not been completed elsewhere. Lloyd's landlord did pay for her to live in a motel for a short period of time, but that has ended. She says her only option was to move into her shed.
There's no place else you can afford to live when you're a senior.
There could be up to 1.33 million older adults in Canada living in poverty.
Alyssa Brearley is the executive director of the National Institute of Aging, a public policy institute that aims to improve the lives of older adults. She says seniors on a fixed income are often extremely vulnerable to changes in their rent or living situations and are one of the fastest growing populations facing homelessness. According to Zumper's housing report, the average rent in Midland is just over $2,000 a month. Lloyd currently pays $1,000 plus utilities and earns $2,000 monthly from her pension. The County of Simcoe considers affordable rent to be 70 to 80% of the local average market rent. The Institute says that's the current definition of affordable housing in Canada.
If that cost has escalated far beyond what's reasonable, and you're taking, say, 70 or 80% of that and deeming it to be affordable, that doesn't help somebody whose income hasn't moved.
For Lloyd, she's locked in a landlord-tenancy board dispute and has a hearing scheduled for later this month. She has secured temporary shelter as her shed has now become too cold, but it remains her backup plan if a permanent solution isn't found.
Now, does that seem right to you? This poor lady, yes, she has some sort of health issues due to the mold, but she can't go anywhere because she can't afford it. They just said that the rent there in Midland average is just over $2,000. She only gets $2,000 from her pension. She would be paying over 100% of her income just to rent a place. So now she has to move into this shed. Like, this is not the Canada that we should be proud of. And the bloc is trying to increase a pension for old people. It might help them in situations like this, but in all honesty, I don't even think that would help because things are just so unaffordable in Canada. This lady essentially would not be able to get any food, any medication, anything else. Just dump it all into rent. And as you heard from the report, it said that this is one of the fastest growing populations that we have that will potentially be homeless. And then this also trickles into now the MAID program where they're just offering this to whoever they want. These people, they don't want to be homeless. They don't want to live in poverty. So they're turning to this MAID stuff because it's the quick and easy way to get out of this because they don't want to be suffering anymore. They should be able to live in dignity after they've put in all this time and effort with working. They have their pension. They should be able to live a life, a decent life on their pension. But things are becoming so unaffordable, they're now opting out to just dying, which is absolutely bananas. But even with all that being said, let's head back to Pierre because he's going to let you know about how deep the government actually has their hands in your pockets with these stats.
Now, obviously, government gatekeepers that block home building are largely to blame for the fact that we have the fewest homes per capita in the G7, even though we have the most land to build on. But there's also the taxes. In Ontario today, 1/3 of the cost of every new home is direct taxes. That does not include the indirect taxes of, for example, income tax on construction workers and businesses, or all the paperwork and delays and consultants you have to pay just to get the building permits. I'm talking about direct taxes. So let's get this clear. When you buy a new home today, more of the money you spend goes to bureaucrats than goes to the carpenters, electricians, and plumbers who actually build the house. This is insane. The number one cost for a home is government. Government bureaucrats, government taxes, government gatekeepers. 30%, as I said, is taxes, and 39% of all the taxes in a new home are federal taxes, including the GST. The GST, which adds $50,000 to the cost of $1 million home. It's a 5% federal tax. It was supposed to be indexed. You used to have a rebate on the first 450 grand of a new home back when the GST was instituted 3 decades ago. That threshold was supposed to go up every year, but it didn't. And now, good luck trying to get a house for 450 grand. You can't find anything for that after 9 years of Trudeau. So everybody basically is paying GST on their new home. The GST was not meant to apply to the basic necessities of food and housing. That's why the exemption existed in the first place.
You know, I gotta say, it is absolutely wild to hear these numbers, especially when we have a government going on about how fiscally responsible they are, yet currently going $7 billion over budget, having Trudeau run on the platform of the budgets will balance themselves, and then them saying, oh, well, interest rates are going down. The Bank of Canada has lowered it once again. We're doing great with inflation. Sunny ways, everybody. Everything is all sunshine and rainbows. There's no problems here, clearly. Yet when we hear the stats of the 2 million people at the food banks, homeless encampments rising, like something's got to give. Something's got to change. And it has to be this government getting out, the conservatives getting in, and hopefully they can change it fast enough that we're going to start to feel some relief. But hey guys, I'd love to hear from you guys. What do you think about all this? Let me know in the comment section below. And as always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.